Hello, folks. Good morning, everyone. I'm Mandeep Singh, CEO and founder of Mandeeps.com. Welcome to our webinar, Live Tokens. We'll get started here in just a moment. All right. So let's get started here. During the webinar, if you have any questions at any time, please feel free to use chat to ask. And if you think it's better to ask your question over voice, then feel free to unmute yourself and ask a question as well. All right, we'll go ahead and get started here. All right, let's look at live tokens. Live tokens is basically allows you to use tokens to add dynamic content on any page in any module on your DNN Evoq site. Now, just a little bit of context here. We had a wonderful product in the community by DNN Sharp called My Tokens, which is no longer available for sale by DNN Sharp. It's now part of their a bigger platform bundle and so forth. So from past several months, we've had customers coming out to us asking for a need to fill in that void. And then we had a wonderful customer come and sponsor the development to make live tokens happen. So live tokens is there. It is version 1, so it has a minimal amount of features, but it's there to get the job done. So I'm sure all of us are familiar with token replacement in DNN. The HTML module has token replacement. We can replace the core DNN tokens and so forth. Well, live tokens lets you do that, but then it also lets you create your own tokens on the fly. And more importantly, be able to query data from a database, whether it's DNN database or internal database, and use those as a token on your page. Now, there's key differences between how live tokens work and how the core DNN tokens work, or how DNN Sharp My Tokens worked. And we'll cover that. So if you go to our website, if you need to find more information, it's under low code called tokens. And it's just basically some information on the product. So we don't have to look through this because we're going to go through a live demo and actually work on it right now. So let's go ahead and do that. What I have here is a brand new website, DNN 9.10.2, that is just installed. And I went ahead and installed live tokens on it to save us time of actually going through the installation process. So there's live tokens installed. Not being used just yet. So we'll go ahead and get started with that. So let's just create a page really quick. And this is more or less like your admin page. It only needs to be visible to admins. Does not need to be in the menu. But for the sake of this demo, I'm just going to add it so I can quickly toggle back and forth. Here's a page that I'm going to use for administrating my tokens. And let's add the tokens module to this page. Let's close out of it. All right. So there's the tokens module, and this is the backend administration of it. So let's look at the first thing right here, which is called pages right here, and see which pages we want to replace tokens on. And this is probably the most different aspect of live tokens than what we're used to. Now, normally what we have is in DNN tokens is an HTML module, and you can go to the settings and you can say replace tokens, and then it will start replacing tokens. So these are the core DNN tokens. Now, the problem with this approach is that you can only replace tokens in modules that support that functionality. Let's say I had a third-party module, or let's say I had a custom module that I built, and I didn't configure for it to replace tokens. Well, live tokens does not care which module, which page you're on. It can replace tokens anywhere, on any page, in any module. So that is a great feature, because now you could start replacing tokens in forms modules and forums modules, anywhere where you need to, whether the vendor supported that functionality or not, especially your own custom tokens. Now, that also brings a security issue then, because if you can replace tokens anywhere, then possibly those tech-savvy users who know what the tokens are could also go ahead and probably put tokens into their profile or some other areas and start replacing them. So that's why it's important that you come in and enable token replacement on certain pages where you know you're using them and you are aware that there's no way users can add content. For example, they can't put a forum post or they can't put a profile post. So you don't want to have them be able to add tokens. So what we're going to do just for testing, I'm going to say, let's replace tokens only on the home page. So I'm going to enable that. And then as an administrator, you have the option if you don't want tokens replaced for admins, yes or no. So when they're browsing, they can see the actual token versus the value if that helps them. So you can toggle this on and off. All right, so let's go to core. And these are our core tokens that are available. We should all be very familiar with them. For example, a user, I want to see what the current user name is, what their user ID, full name, and so forth. And an interesting feature is what we call test. To test these tokens, I can just click on any one of these. And what it does is takes the token to the test area. I can hit replace and see what would actually be the output if I were to use that token. So here it's telling me, the current user logged in as super user account, which is correct. So I could just take this token, which again, I found from user, and then I just use this token right here. Go to my home page now because I've enabled token replacement. I can add any module, but I'm just going to go with text just for sake of ease of use. Go to edit content. I'm just going to say hello, and I'm just going to paste my token. And there it is. It's replaced as hello super user account. Notice it has nothing to do with HTML replace tokens. It's just replacing tokens behind the scenes automatically. Now I can even go ahead and put these tokens into the header and footer of any module, because as long as the content is being server-side generated, the tokens will be replaced. So it doesn't matter where the content's coming from. As long as it's coming from your server side, your backend, the tokens will be replaced. Okay, so that's pretty easy. Let's go back to tokens. Let's go to core. So we have a lot of tokens in terms of formatting. So if you look at date, there's a lot of different options pre-built for you. It's really easy to go ahead and quickly test that out. So that's what the date would actually look like with the time and everything if you want something. So all those tokens are right there. The membership tokens, whether last time date, change their last login date, last activity date, and so forth. So let's there's current tabs, current profile data, and all that information. Now this is dynamically generated. So if you're going to add more profile fields to your site, you will see more tokens appear here automatically. That is core tokens. Pretty simple, pretty easy. Let's talk about custom tokens, the tokens that we want to go ahead and create and start using. So let's go up to namespace. Every custom token requires that you have a namespace, and namespace is nothing but a way for us to organize our tokens and also kind of limit the scope in which they can be used and how they can be used. So for this demo, I'm just going to call this Mandeep's, or we can even just call this my tokens or anything along this line, but let's just call this Mandeep's. And then you obviously give it a description. This is for your internal purposes. I'm just going to say call it site-wide namespace. What's important here is you have a scope at the bottom, which means can this namespace be used just on this site? So any tokens that are inside that namespace, can they only be used on this site, or can they be used on any site on your DNN install? So you can scope it here. Again, this has some implications of security, where you don't want your tokens being used by other sites, as well as organization. I'm just going to go ahead and create that namespace. Very simple, just quickly create the namespace. Now let's come down here to our custom tokens. Then let's create a token. Let's say I have a product and I'm showing its pricing all over my site on 50 different pages. And obviously I don't want to update those 50 pages every time the price changes. So we're going to use a token. And this is my token name. I can call it whatever I want. I don't have a product, so I'm just going to call it product A and call it product A name. So name of product A. And again, this is your token name, so call it whatever you want. We'll cover caching in just a second, but I'm going to leave the source as constant, which is I'm just going to type in what the token value is. And call this, let's just call this live tokens. So that's our product. And hit update. And I'm going to go ahead and create another token and call this product a price. Actually, this would have made a lot more sense if you call this live tokens price, but let's just continue with the product a price. We'll go down here, we'll just call it, I don't know, 20 bucks just for the demo. And hit update there. Now, again, I can test these right from here, so I can quickly go there, hit replace. I see it says live tokens. Now, I can always add stuff here and test it myself too. So I'm going to add price in here, make sure that has also been rendered correctly. So live tokens, 20 bucks. That's great. Let's go back to our home page and actually use these here. Make sure they're working. So all right. So there we go. We just used those tokens. So we just released live tokens. This is now coming from our custom token. I can use that token on any number of pages, on any number of modules. If you ever have to change anything to it, you just simply go back and change it. So let's go ahead and quickly do that. Go down to custom, and if I want to change the name, you can go ahead and change the name here to let's instead of live tokens now, let's call this live forms. Let's update that, and then I can similarly go ahead and change the pricing as well. Let's call that 200. So let's go back to homepage, and there it is. We see that the name got changed. See the price got changed. And then that's the beauty of tokens. So if you're using them on multiple places, you just make change at one place, and it gets replicated across automatically. All right, that was the easiest use case. Custom tokens, which is the constant string custom token, which we did. We'll go ahead and look at the database once next. But before we do that, let's look at the caching and understand how caching works. So caching has a bigger implication when we go in database rather than string constant. But let's understand what caching is. So when you have a database getting the data for your data SQL query that you're going to write and get the data out rather than hard coding it in a string constant, you want to minimize going back that round trips to the database. You don't want to go back to the database every time to get the data. So caching is kind of makes sense. Here, you simply specify how many seconds do you want to cache it for. If you want to cache it for 5 minutes, you can put 300 and so forth. And then what we have, the more important stuff, is cache type. How is this cached? Is this globally cached, which means it doesn't matter which site it's being used at, we just cache it and then we show the same data on every site, or we maintain this cache differently for each site. Now, why would this be important? We'll take a look at this once we get to actually writing queries. So let's go ahead and do that. All right, what we're gonna do is add a new token, and let's say if one wanted to pick this product information from my own table. I don't have any tables available to do that, so I'm just going to use some of the DNN tables to pick up data from. Let's just call it current. Oh, let's do this. Current tab. Just call it tabs, or just tab. Some test token. And what we're going to do is change the source to database. And now when we click on configure source, we get to choose a connection string. The site SQL server is your default DNN database, which is defined in web.config. Now you can go ahead and define any connection string. Pull that up. So you can go ahead and define any connection string in your web.config. So if you wanted to connect to a different SQL server, you would simply come to the connection strings right here and just add another connection string like this one and just give it a different name. Now, this connection string could go to your external database or any other SQL database. Just make sure it has a distinct name. Once you define that in your web.config, you will have the option to select that from here so you can execute queries against that. So for us, it's just site SQL, so we'll just go ahead and do that. In query for this one, I'm just going to pick something up from database. So let's just say select top one from tabs. And for those who are familiar with the DNN architecture, tabs is where all the pages are stored. And I'm selecting all columns from that query right now. Now I get to decide which ones I actually want to make token. So here I can specify the data I want to pick up from that query and make token. So I'm just going to say, let's take tab name. I can take the tab ID. I think there's something called tab order, and there's a lot of other data and other things. But just for demonstration, I think this will suffice. So let's hit update and hit update again. Now, if I go and view or test my tab token that I just created, so notice the hierarchy. We have our token starting with the curly brackets. The reason we did that is because we don't want any confusion with existing DNN tokens that are used all over. When you see curly bracket tokens, it's obvious they're coming from live tokens. They work differently. So curly bracket, your namespace, colon, the name of the token, dot, the columns that you're picking up from your databases. So this is the same naming scheme that's used throughout. If you go to core stuff, you will see that we have the namespace called core, colon, the token itself, tab, and dot, all the options that we have available in that. So let's head back to the token we just created and take a look at it. And I'm going to go ahead and hit replace. Now, the first tab, remember my query said select top one, was simply the host of the first tab made. And it's telling me the tab name is host, the tab ID is 7. Now, this is fine, and it's working. Well, let's go ahead and actually edit this. And I'm going to call this, go back and change this. And instead of doing all tabs, let's do a where clause, because I want to be able to put the data that is personalized for that user. So you may want to use the current user logged in, is their user ID, and so forth. Now, just for this demo, I'm just going to end up using core tab dot tab ID, where tab ID equals. So this will give me the current tab ID. We already have a core token that does that, but again, I'm just demonstrating how we can write our own queries. We could have just used core user ID, so we can pull data for the user who's currently logged in, then get all the data, for example, all the orders they've created, the count, the last order date, or things along those nature, anything. I mean, this is really open slate for you to build what you want. So let's go ahead and do that. I'm going to go ahead and update this, hit update again, and go back here and test it out. So now, as you can see, because my query is filtered by the current tab ID, is showing me the tab name currently that I'm on is tokens, and the tab ID is 33. So let's go ahead and try and use this on the homepage really quick. And just for demo, I'm just going to put it there. And notice that I'm on homepage now, so it's showing me home, and the tab ID is 21. So that is working. We know our tokens are being replaced. So the learning lesson basically is that you can use tokens, within your custom tokens and nest them and so forth to build what you need to build. Now let's go back here and really go back to that cache that I was talking about. Now, if you are writing queries that have a user ID token in it, then you want to probably cache that for that particular user only. You don't want that user ID cached being shown to another user. So if you're writing queries that are user specific, means it's bringing data that is only for that user, you want to make sure your cache subtype is set to user. If you are writing queries that are specific only for that particular site, for example, maybe using a portal ID in there somewhere or something along those lines, then you want to set it up to site. But if you are bringing data that is just global, it doesn't matter which site is going to take a look at it, then you can go ahead and set it to global. So very easy functionality in terms of caching. You have those three options. Now, if you don't want cache, you want to keep it disabled, just keep cache seconds to 0. All right. Okay, so this was fairly quick. Covered everything. I think it would be great to answer any questions at this time and address those. In terms of functionality, like I said, it's really enables the developers, the advanced users, to now bring in any data from their database source through SQL queries and show the tokens across any page on any module. So just to test it out, if I were to go to a different page, or if I were to uncheck home, then our token shouldn't be replacing anymore. There you go. This gives us the ability to make sure the tokens are only being replaced on specific pages and not anywhere. So at this time, I'd like to welcome, if you guys have any questions, feel free to unmute and ask, or you can ask in chat. And then once we address those questions, I can talk about a little bit about the roadmap, what we have for this product. So first question, is there any concept of parameters for the tokens? Josh, can you explain that more? What kind of parameters are you referring to? Are you looking for formatting parameters? For example, in our core, like we've used parameters in the past, but we do have formatting pipelines. So you could, for example, pass in the formatting pipelines like these. For example, if you choose this one right here, it formats the date and time like this. So there is formatting pipelines built in. That's what you're referring to. If not, then please let me know which specific parameters you're after. So Josh is asking about passing in a product ID to a database token. So yeah, absolutely. You can nest tokens. So let's say you have a SQL query that brings your product ID. You can then use that SQL query in another SQL query to bring the product, or you could have a custom token, a string constant token with your product ID already there, which you can then use in your SQL query. So in other words, you could nest your token. So you can use the core tokens and custom tokens within other custom tokens to be able to do that and pass in a product ID. As I did here, I passed in a current tab ID. I could have easily passed in my own custom product ID if I wanted to. For example, if I had a product called, it's a product A that I created earlier, I could pass in as product ID. Or I could have created a separate SQL query first, which was bringing the product ID, and then used his token here. So yeah, they're nested. You can pass those around. All right. Next question we have: is there a way to loop through results? So no, not at the moment. The SQL query that you're writing, we're just picking up the first row to create the tokens, because you can't you can't, if there were multiple results, then there's no way for us to kind of come up with a naming scheme for those token names for it to work. But to address what you're saying is on the roadmap, what we have is Razor script support. So if you run a query, you will get the model back and you can write your own Razor script to kind of go ahead and do that. Now, I'm not sure how much functionality will go there because that is precisely what our live visualizer does, which is our app builder. So an app builder allows you to write SQL query, and then you get everything back as a model, and then you can create pretty much an entire app out of it using your SQL query and templates. And it has a lot of scope for templates and a lot of functionality in terms of Razor structure. So tokens are meant more for light use. If you're intending to build apps and so forth, you would want to probably look at live visualizer. So going back to Josh and his original question, is there a token that can get data from the query string? Yes, absolutely. And it is missing here. So I know it's built in, it's just not here as an option. But absolutely, you can get data from the query string. So I think we'll do a quick minor release update here. We'll add the URL query string example here, so you can quickly go ahead and test it out. It's if I'm not mistaken, it's basically core URL dot whatever the parameters you're picking up, and that will get you your query string. But like I said, I think it's great to have that here, so it's easier to kind of pick it up. I mean, maybe we can put an example of. I think the reason it's not there because we don't know exactly what token name you're going to pick up, but I think we should have it there as an example, so you don't have to go to documentation to find that. But yeah, great question, Josh. That's built in. Any other questions on my tokens that I can address? All right, I think that's a wrap then. This was a short webinar just to demonstrate what live tokens does, and I'm sure as we get more community feedback, we'll incorporate that and keep adding more features to it. Thank you so much for joining this webinar, and I hope to see you guys soon in the next one. Take care, everyone. Thank you.